Hello my lovely students and welcome to this GCSE Classics video on Aphrodite or Venus. Here's the stuff you're meant to know and why. You've probably seen that in all the other videos, so let's get started. Her common epithets are the goddess of love, the goddess of sex, the goddess of beauty, the goddess of fertility, which is also known as Lady of Cyprus or Lady of Cythera, the places that are sacred to her. Her symbols, what she is seen with, nakedness. It kind of sounds weird to say nakedness is a symbol, but essentially, if you see a woman without any clothes on in Greek mythological art, it's probably her. She's more naked in an, oh no, I just dropped my towel kind of way, rather than a, I'm really sexy kind of way. And often she's covered in a gauzy fabric, which leaves not a lot to the imagination. But technically, she is dressed. Or we see her as actually completely robed, sometimes even with her belt of desire, which is a slightly MacGuffin-y type thing invented by the later poets. But robed she is certainly in earlier Greek art. She's often seen accompanied by her birds that symbolise her, the swan and the dove, both white and pure and, well, the swan will attack you if you do it wrong. Possibly with one of her lovers, or with her son Eros, or Roman Cupid, who symbolises love, a mirror when she is symbolising beauty, and remember these weren't made of glass, these were made of polished metal, or a myrtle wreath, or myrtle sprigs, so if she's seen with a flower, or something that looks like a wreathy headdress, that is the myrtle flower, which symbolises marriage. Aphrodite or Venus's responsibilities, or what she's known for. So things you might need to know about her. She's so beautiful that Zeus married her off to avoid a war among the gods. So many of the other gods wanted to marry her. She is also well known for being the mother to Eros or Cupid, a representation of love. Although sometimes she is also not his mother, she is more a being that is created alongside of him. He is one aspect of her entire personality. She is also well known, especially in stories, for being married unhappily to Hephaestus, Roman Vulcan, but also being the lover of Ares, the Roman Mars. The story is that she would much rather have married Ares, Mars, but Hephaestus, or Vulcan, held Zeus and Hera to ransom and ask for the most beautiful of all the gods to be his bride, to rather make up for them all calling him ugly. However, she has affairs with many gods and some mortals, and has mostly immortal children. She is in fact married to at least one mortal as a punishment. We'll get to her children later. She's also well known for not really being a warrior at all. Her sphere is mostly love. She is in fact in the Iliad and she is wounded by Diomedes. He attacks her while she's trying to save her son Aeneas. So in that way she's kind of personified as motherly love that will do anything for their child. But Zeus makes it all better, although she totally makes Diomedes' life hell afterwards. Yet, if you look at all her epithets, she has lots of really warlike epithets like leader and bearer of victory, but then also sea-themed epithets like Aphrodite of good sailing. So she, just like love, enters so many spheres of life and was a very well-known and well-worshipped goddess. She's also very well known for coming from Cyprus. Her birth story is kind of an icky one. When Uranos was castrated by his son Kronos, his genitals fell into the sea and created Aphrodite. So she is then traditionally, especially in imagery, born to the shoreline of Cyprus, or sometimes Cythera, in a seashell. And of course there are some very, very famous paintings, frescoes from Pompeii to later artwork in the Renaissance of her doing exactly this, being born on a seashell. However, another version of her birth story is in fact that she is Zeus's daughter instead of his kind of auntie, and Dione, a Mother Earth goddess who seems to have been replaced later by Hera. Her name is in Greece derived from the ancient Greek aphros, meaning foam, which is the story of her birth. The castrated genitals fall on the sea, create foam, and from this she is created. However, she is possibly also related to the Phoenician goddess Astaroth, who was the same as the Assyrian goddess Ishtar, who's a virginal goddess of the moon or the heavens, but frequently confounded since biblical times with the sensual Asherah, the goddess, whose full title, Rabat Atirat Yami, Lady Atherat of the Sea, or she who treads on the sea, seemed to give her more sexual nature. For Rome, it seems much more straightforward that her name comes from the Proto-Indo-European root word wen, to desire or to strive for, thus having a much more connected idea of her being the goddess of love and desire. The way she is seen in ancient Greece is nude, but with great beauty and charm, or rising from a seashell, or with her son Eros, or multiple versions of Eros, where they're called the erotes, or other symbols that we've talked about before. And in Rome, it's essentially the same. Naked, usually, or at least one breast displayed if she's covered up elsewhere, or rising from a seashell, or with her son Cupid, the Roman version of Eros, or multiple versions of him, the Cupides, or again, her other symbols. So she's pretty easy to spot. As I mentioned earlier, if she looks a bit naked, she's probably Aphrodite. Some notes on her. She is incredibly important in ancient Greece as a goddess of sexual desire, not only in the personal sphere, but also in storytelling. And she is absolutely crucial to the story of the Iliad and to the whole Trojan War. She's the one who tempts the Trojan Paris with the sexiest woman in the world, Helen, as her plaything. For Rome, however, it's worth noting that her role rather changes. She's not necessarily all about sex and desire, but she's actually seen as a mother to Romans. She is the mother of Aeneas, the Trojan who escaped Troy and founded a city, Lavinium, which would found a city, Alba Longa, which would have its children, Romulus and Remus, who would found Rome. So Aeneas is an ancestral founder or proto-founder of the Roman race. He is a minor character in the Iliad, and he's the main character of the Aeneid. So the fact that Aeneas is related directly to Venus, who is the daughter, or at least is looked after by her paterfamilias, Jupiter, that's incredibly important to the Romans. They can trace their lineage back to the gods. Augustus, on becoming emperor, began using symbols of Venus in art associated with him in order to link himself with Rome's history and Aeneas. His most famous statue, the Prima Porta, has a very diddy little winged baby, Cupid, right at the bottom, tugging on his cloak to remind him that he is both related to the gods but just mortal. A story concerning Aphrodite. The story of Myrrha and Adonis. Myrrha was a Cyprian princess who fell in love with her own father. There are lots of versions of this story. Normally, it is seen as a curse that she is made to fall in love with her father because her mother declares her more beautiful than any god. Watch my video on hubris. She decides to seduce her father in the dark. And when he understands what she has done, he plans to kill her. This cannot be borne. Incest is only something that the gods do because there are no consequences in their lives and they are immortal. That is not the same for humans. She fled his wrath and was transformed into the myrrh tree. And this tree, famous for its sap and oil, I think, became something that you would wear, and it was meant to be an aphrodisiac, something that made you feel quite sexy. However, then, being pregnant by her father, the boy Adonis is born from her trunk, and this is where Aphrodite comes in. Aphrodite gives the baby to Persephone to raise in the underworld, but later, when she goes back to visit him, she finds he has grown into the most amazing specimen of manhood, and she falls in love with him straight away. But so has Persephone fallen in love with him. And so they decide, and I wonder who came up with this idea, to share him. He would have a third of the year in the underworld with Persephone, and a third of the year with Aphrodite, and the final third of the year with whomever he chose. And of course, being the goddess of love and the most beautiful goddess, he chose Aphrodite. Adonis is now technically a term used to describe a beautiful young man. As I said earlier, children of Aphrodite are numerous, and she has immortal and mortal children. Her most famous immortal children are probably Harmonia, goddess of harmony, Deimos, god of fear, Phobos, god of fear and panic, and Anteros, love returned, love given back. Those are all of her children by her lover Ares, and it makes sense that they are about love and fear. love and war are so very, very close. She also has Eros, and in fact more than one Eros, the Erotes, either by Ares or possibly even by Hermes, because they're flying. Or the story goes that she is born pregnant in the sea foam, as like the literal personification of fertility. She also is famous for giving birth to Hermaphroditos by Hermes. Hermaphroditos was a beautiful young man who was unfortunately stalked by this nymph called Salmacis, who would not let go of him and prayed that they would be joined together forever, and they were spliced into one person. So Hermaphroditos is half boy and half girl. He has the sexual organs of both, and people who are born with both types of sexual organs are called hermaphrodite. She's also the mother of Priapos. Don't do a Google search for Priapos, all right? He's a bit scary. He's a tripod. He kind of has 3 legs. Essentially, do not Google him. Also possibly the mother of Iacchos, who becomes the sort of kind of a god, demon of the ritual cry, and then is linked with the Eleusinian mysteries. And they are both children by Dionysus. You can kind of get why Priapus is Dionysus's kid, right? And then there's Rhodos and Hierophile. Rhodos is essentially the personification of Rhodes, and Hierophile is her sister, who was a nymph and possibly a sibyl, a future seer. And Beroe, the daughter she has by Adonis, is a nymph. Her mortal children are as famous. Aeneas, as I said earlier, the proto-founder of the Roman race, by Anchises, a mortal man, a noble of Troy, whom, as a punishment, she is forced to marry, not because he's awful, but because she has to then watch him grow old and die, which is pretty horrible. Astyanoos, her son with Phaeton, he in fact fathers a king who fathers the king Kineras of Cyprus. He's the one whose daughter Myrrha tried to seduce him and then was actually successful. And Eryx by Butes. Eryx was a king on Sicily, and he is in fact mentioned in the Aeneid. So overall, she is a really important goddess. Yes, she governs the physical and romantic love of mortals, but that is such an important part of mortal life that you find her popping up in all other different areas. She is also still a byword for sexual activities. Her Roman name, Veneris, gives us the word venereal, which used to be the word in the phrase venereal diseases, meaning sexually transmitted illness. And she's also the mother of Rome. So she's a very complicated figure. Do not underestimate her. Thank you for watching this video, and have a look at the rest of this playlist in which all of the Olympian gods will be covered.